The law of David Carrier. Welcome to our webinar this morning. I'm with Amanda Matthews. Amanda is the Executive Director of Widowed Person Service Grand Rapids. This morning, we're going to have a real casual conversation. Get your coffee, get some refreshment, and then we're just going to start in just a moment. Just a few housekeeping things as we get started. I know people have many questions when they come to a webinar. And if you would put those questions in the Q&A feature that you hopefully have in front of you, that's where we're going to be answering the questions from. Hopefully we'll have answers to your questions as we go through the material. But if we don't get to them, we can take questions at the end of the seminar. So just as you think of something, put it in there, and we've got someone here to monitor your questions, and we'll get to all those at the end. First of all, I want to tell you a little bit about Amanda and me. Years ago, I was on the board of Widowed Person Service. I was briefly the executive director of Widowed Person Service. So that's how Amanda and I know each other. It's a wonderful organization, serves Kent County and surrounding areas. And we are very, very pleased at Carrier Law to partner with them. We've been doing that for several years. We attend all of their fun events, and Amanda's going to tell you about those fun events in just a minute. And we're just so pleased that we're able to help them move their organization forward. So that's why Amanda's here with us today. I want to tell you a little bit about my background. I have been at Carrier Law for 3 years, 3 wonderful years with a lot of wonderful people here who love serving the Grand Rapids community. In fact, we've got offices in other communities too. We've got one in Holland, Norton Shores, and Portage. So we're spread around a lot, and we get to see a lot of people in all those offices. Unfortunately, we see people who are in dire straits, though. Often people come to our office. They've lost a loved one. That's what we're talking about today. What happens when we lose a loved one? Particularly if the loved one is a spouse, it's very devastating for the family. It brings to the fore a lot of emotion. People are emotionally invested in their families, maybe in their family property, maybe in that cottage that they've all shared for years. And now all of their traditions have evaporated with the death of a mom or a dad. So that's what we're going to focus on today, how we can right the ship when a devastating event happens in your family. So just to give you a little background about what I've been doing, we had, like many of you, I'm sure, elderly family members who have died, 2 of them during COVID, not with COVID, but during COVID. My family's in the middle of handling 3 estates right now. And in COVID, I'm sure many of you have seen it's a lot more difficult to get things handled, a lot more time consuming. And when you go, if you have to interact with any court or government office, you know that they've been closed for months. Maybe your loved one died during the pandemic, and you've been putting things off. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is trying to get a few things done sooner rather than later. Okay. So a lot of books talk about don't do anything for a year if your spouse dies. Don't make any big decisions. Don't sell your house. Don't remarry. Don't sell everything and move to Florida, right? Just take that year and figure out what you want to do. And that's good advice for a lot of big decisions. But there's some smaller things that we need to take care of sooner rather than later. Now, we don't have to do that the day after the funeral, okay? The day after the funeral is a time to be with our family, grieve, see the people we need to see. We don't need to do it a week after the funeral, but within a month or two after the funeral, we need to start getting our ducks in a row. Okay, and there are just a couple things that I'm going to go over. Just take a few minutes on that couple of things. So what we first need to do is find the estate plan that the loved one had. Now, hopefully they have an estate plan. Hopefully they have a will and a trust, maybe some powers of attorney, and it's all in a big notebook. If you did your estate plan with David Carrier, there's going to be a blue notebook. And we need to locate that blue notebook with all of our original documents in it. When we go through that notebook, we're going to look for our loved one's will who passed away, that a husband or wife, hopefully have a will in that blue notebook. And we need to get that will recorded with the death certificate. And we need to do that sooner rather than later, because that's going to be just one piece of business that needs to be done so that we can move forward with our paperwork. If you want to do that yourself, you can take the will and the death certificate, and you do need the death certificate with the raised seal, not copies of the death certificate. And you need to go down to probate court and file those two documents. Let's assume that you and your spouse owned a house together and you're still in the family house. Most people have the husband and wife on their deed when they bought that house. If it's done like that, your spouse passed away, husband and wife on the deed, then we need to take that death certificate, another copy of that, so a second copy of the death certificate, and we need to go to the Register of Deeds in the county where the house is located. Okay, so if you're in Kent County, you need to go to the Register of Deeds downtown in Grand Rapids and record that deed. What that's going to do is put the house in the surviving spouse's name. Okay, and we need to do that for the taxes. The tax year is going to come up. A year can blow by very quickly, and we want to get the tax bill coming in the surviving spouse's name. So we do need to think about that. That's one of those things we need to think about sooner rather than later. The next thing that we're going to think about are things like bank accounts, savings accounts. Okay, if we just have joint accounts, perhaps you had a will or a trust and you were either the owner of an account jointly, or you and your husband had a trust and you were co-trustees on bank accounts. Then again, what we need to do is go to our financial institutions, and we need to take that raised copy of the death certificate, and then we need to put the accounts in the surviving spouse's name. And that'll be another important thing for our taxes at the end of the year. We want it in the surviving spouse's name. After that, we might have retirement accounts. So you want to double check, make sure that you know where your deceased spouse's retirement accounts are. And most likely the surviving spouse is going to be the beneficiary on those retirement accounts. So we want those retirement accounts to roll over to the surviving spouse. So again, what we need to do, get the death certificate, go to the custodian of the account. Now that might be a stockbroker. For a lot of us, we have a stockbroker who's managing our retirement money. We need to go over there and make sure that we complete whatever paperwork they need to make sure that those accounts roll over to the surviving spouse. So again, we don't need to do that immediately after a funeral, but you do want to do it within a few weeks, 1 to 2 months. We need to get out and do that little piece of business. Now, a lot of people may have a life insurance policy that their spouse took out on them years ago. A lot of us have almost forgotten about the life insurance policy. Very common to not remember exactly where the life insurance policy is, because we've paid it up maybe, and it's, in a pile of paperwork. So what we want to do is we want to go around the deceased house. We want to make sure that we can locate any life insurance policy, and then whoever the beneficiary is needs to make a claim for that life insurance. So we need to be doing that sooner rather than later. We've talked about taking death certificates to all these different places. So what does that mean? That means we need about a dozen copies, usually, of the death certificate with the raised seal. Now, if you have gone through a funeral home, you've had a big funeral for the deceased, they've probably gotten all those death certificates for you. Some people, though, don't have a big funeral. Maybe they just go and have their loved one cremated, and that's not a service that's provided by the crematorium. So we just need to make sure that we get those death certificates in a timely manner too, so that we have plenty of them for everything that we need to take care of. Now, the next thing that we have is personal property. What about all that stuff in our deceased loved one's home or condominium? And that depends, right? If the surviving spouse still lives there, most likely all of that property is just going to remain with the surviving spouse. The deceased loved one might have made a list of property that they'd like to give out to different relatives. So let's say you had a grandson who went fishing with grandpa, every summer. Grandpa might have promised him that fishing pole, so grandpa might have made a list of the things that he'd like for the grandson to get. So we just need to look around for the list. Now, again, if you have a binder with everything in it from carrier law, we're going to look right behind the will. And if there is a list provided by grandpa, it would be located right behind the will in the binder. So we're going to take a look at that sooner rather than later so we can locate those items. So what we see at the end of all this is really what we need to do in the first couple of months is just make an inventory of everything that we have. Okay, so bank accounts, personal property, life insurance, bank accounts, retirement accounts, savings, whatever there is, insurance, whatever there is. We need to make sure that we know where it is. Okay, and we need to make a little list of making sure that we have accounted for all those items. Okay. Now, again, if you went to carrier law and you have that binder, in the back of the binder, you'll see an asset detail report. And if you have that for the loved one, it should tell you, at least from the time that they originally made their estate plan, where their assets are, and all of the account numbers will be there. So that's a good resource if one of the kids is helping mom or dad try to settle up an estate. Now, everybody usually has a question about the car. A lot of us only have a vehicle in one person's name. So maybe mom had a car, dad had a car, and that car was only in mom or dad's name. If the deceased had a car, that's going to be personal property in the estate. All you need to do with that, pretty simple, is contact the Secretary of State. There'll be a few forms to fill out on their website. And then again, you'll take that death certificate to the Secretary of State, and we'll put the car in the surviving spouse's name. Unless dad gave the car to a grandson, it'll just stay with the surviving spouse. So that's just the little bit of housekeeping that we wanted to talk about today, that just sort of gets you moving forward in the estate, gets some get some business done that really needs to be done during that first year. You know, we don't want to wait 2 years out and then you know, we filed a tax return and we didn't even have anything in the right name at the end of the year. So we just want to make sure just that little bit of housekeeping we get done. Mom can do it, or one of the kids can assist mom in getting that done. Now, just a little bit after doing that, you know, you've run around all these banks. We know it's exhausting, got a lot of things going on, run around to a stockbroker. I encourage you to just take a minute, if you've got an estate plan at your home, to take a look at your own, the surviving spouse, take a look at your own will in there. If you've got a trust in there, take a look at it. If you've got powers of attorney, either to sign anything financial for you or for your health care, just take a look at who's handling those, okay? So in the will, the personal representative, typically there's a list of people there who's going to handle your estate. Often the first person up to handle a will is the spouse who passed away. Also on your trust, often the person who's going to handle the trust is the spouse that passed away. With the health care, which is another big item in your estate plan, often the spouse is the one that you picked initially to handle any health care decisions. So what we need to start thinking about sooner rather than later with that is, what happens if I get sick? What happens if I get in a car wreck? What am I gonna do, because I had the spouse handling everything and now I don't have the spouse alive to handle it. So what we're going to do is we're going to think about who makes sense to help you when you're sick, hurt, disabled, okay? And then I'm going to encourage you to go to the lawyer who handled your original estate plan. If it's us, you can come here and get a trust review of your documents just to make sure you have the right people on them, because we don't want to end up with an emergency hospital visit and we've got first on our healthcare list the deceased spouse. They're not going to be available to do it, obviously. We've picked a relative 10 or 15 years ago who maybe doesn't even live in Grand Rapids. Maybe they live in California. Maybe they live in New York now. Maybe they've had their own health problems. They just can't help you anymore, okay? So we need to review those names and make sure you have the right people on your health care to help you if you go to the hospital, the right people on your trust to help you if you need checks cut, if you need somebody to do that for you, or the right person to handle your will when you pass away. So our office does review those free of charge. You can call here anytime, and we're able to go through your documents with you. It doesn't matter whether the documents were prepared here or not. We can do them from in any documents that you have, and we can give you advice on that. So also, just to give you a little bit more information, we also have good videos on our website. And if you go to our website, you can access any videos on a lot of topics that might be of interest to you. We also talk about our own documents on there that if you have one of our binders that explains each document that you find in the binder, there are videos on there. So if you don't have time to get to a lawyer's office, you're welcome to look at our website and get some information off our videos. Also, we have other seminars like this, webinars. We are going to be having one August 31st. That's a Tuesday. I just talked about those powers of attorney for healthcare and for financial. Jim Hinkie in our office is going to be doing a video about those powers of attorney, same time as today, 10 o'clock in the morning. So if you'd like to join in that webinar, just sign up for it, just like you did today, August 31st, Tuesday, and he'll be going over the powers of attorney, telling you what you need for health care and for financial decisions. So with that, if you would like, just keep asking questions. Hopefully I've answered some of your questions. If not, we're going to answer questions at the end. So I'm going to turn over the microphone to Amanda Matthews, our Widowed Person Service Executive Director, and she's going to tell you all about Widowed Person Service Grand Rapids.
Hi, thanks so much, Claire. Just a little background, like Claire mentioned, I got to meet Claire almost 3.5 years ago now when she was serving as Executive Director for Widowed Person Service. And it really helped me understand the group, what the mission is, what her role is, and just the special atmosphere that WPS creates in the community. So Widowed Person Service has been around for almost 42 years. Originally, it was started in 1978 by the AARP. It was a federally funded type of nonprofit in all states. But as the years went on, the AARP kind of pulled their funding and left individual groups like us to do our own individual fundraising. And we are basically the last group left in the whole US. I think there's a small chapter left in Texas. Sometimes we get a phone call from them, but we're still the last viable chapter here in Michigan and in the US. And we pride ourselves in that. We've got a great history of really coming around people and creating that type of support and community that so many need at the devastating event of losing a spouse, the death of a spouse. So I got involved. My background, I grew up here in Michigan, attended Hope College and went to law school, and then found myself really having a heart for the nonprofit kind of community and learning more about leadership here in Grand Rapids. So I am very happy that I found a home in WPS, and I hope that I can speak to you a little bit more about what we do, what we're involved in, what our mission is, and how we can at least provide a resource for yourself or for any friend or family member who might be dealing with this, if it's planned or not. Sometimes caregivers go through a certain type of grieving that's different after years of battling a disease or cancer or traumatic injury, and then the unanticipated death of a spouse brings out different types of grief levels and how to go through it. So our office, we are located in Wyoming, Michigan, just off Clyde Park, off 44th and 44th Street. We offer 4 separate support groups throughout the month. Each day is a little bit different. There are some evening support groups, there are some weekend support groups, there are some lunchtime support groups, trying to fit the best schedule for those who still may be working. Some are enjoying retirement and just busy schedules of helping out with grandkids or having the part-time job. Really trying to find the best location and time for people to get there. Throughout the past year or more now, we have also made available the Zoom support group as well, which is led by 2 fantastic facilitators, which is really has been kind of enlightening for people who often the challenge is just trying to get to the meeting itself, whether they have young kids, whether they are just the distance is a little too much to get to some of the support group locations. It has really opened the doors for how we can support and give our resources out beyond our community. We had a woman join us from Minneapolis, Minnesota for about a year. So it really has kind of changed some of that programming for us. But I want you to understand that Claire went through all the important things that you need to do if you are dealing with the death of your spouse. And it's a heavy year, lots of things to do, and you're not going to feel like yourself for the first year. So you need to hopefully get through that list of things that are done sooner rather than later, but also really start taking some time for yourself. And I think after this year of watching some of our support group members go through grieving during a pandemic, it's added an extra layer of just the loneliness and the isolation that many have felt. And that's where WPS can come in and really build your community and make sure that you feel supported and you're not alone. A lot of times I get so many phone calls about why do I feel this way? I feel crazy sometimes. What do I do? I can't see my family. I can't see my friends at church. I can't even get together with my neighbors. And that in itself has created a lot of challenge for even anyone grieving for a special loss like that. So I think WPS, now that we are meeting in person again, has really uplifted a lot of people. We follow certain themes or topics each week, but sometimes the group leads and questions and other topics of discussion will come out of it. And I think after even the past couple months of meeting in person, the feedback of just having others around you, and that's where the peer support comes in. Grieving is part of our program is understanding what grief is, how it affects you physically and emotionally and mentally. That's why please don't make any big decisions unless you really have to, or unless you can some advice and some counsel of some trusted family or advisors. We just like to say, stay where you are, because each holiday is going to feel different. If you're dealing with the death of a spouse, the first anniversary without him or her, or whether you go back to your favorite restaurant immediately, all those things are going to be triggers, and you need to feel that you're at a safe place, hopefully in your home or condo or apartment, where you have these memories of happier times, and just really giving honor and respect to the fact that it takes time to grieve such an important loss. And it takes baby steps. Some days you're going to have good days. Sometimes you might take a few steps back, but really the self-care, I think I've learned this past year, is just so important. So don't feel like there's any right or wrong way to grieve. Only you can answer that for yourself. So the programming is a big part of it, but it's not the only part. Now that things have opened up a little bit, we are now back to our regular schedules of planning dinners out, so you can have dinner, and everyone likes to go out to lunch. And a lot of the motto is you have to eat anyway, and why not do it with friends? At the same time, building a community that you're not alone and you're not the only one feeling the way you are. We also offer, right now there's a golf league going on every Tuesdays in the fall. It's a really fun bowling league. Also cards and euchre nights, potlucks. And now we are now starting to do more of our fundraising events too, which are really important and a great way for people to understand more and hear more about the stories of people who have attended our support groups and what it has meant to them. So I encourage you, I think later on you'll see our webpage, our website, to come visit. It lists through a lot of the things that I said earlier and maybe that I've missed. So you can get a real idea that we've been doing this for a while. We've got some great resources, 2 local authors who run their own support group and have written 5 books on spousal grief. They are still really integral and part of our programming and have a heart to care for the widow and widowers of the community here in Michigan. And then there are other grief groups and programs out there that I hope you utilize, but I think WPS really does the best job when it comes to spousal grief. Other groups and grief shares are going to have different levels or different attachment styles of whether someone lost, a daughter or an aunt. But spousal grief is something that's really unique and needs to be really kind of vetted and shared and kind of gone through differently. And I think WPS creates that environment where you can know that other people have done it too, and it's tough, but with their help and with your help of doing the work and progressing through it, you're going to get through it. And you're going to find out that there's just a new definition for how your days are going to look. And that's okay. At the same time, respecting the love and relationship that you had with your spouse. So I really encourage you, even though it may seem daunting even to get out of the house sometimes, if you're in the first couple months or whether it's been a year. I know this year has been hard, but I encourage you at least to check out our information, call the office, talk to myself or one of the volunteers. We're all volunteer led. I'm the only paid staff, but the rest, I have about 7 to 8 great volunteers who have all gone through our programs, who help really promote and advocate in the community, getting our newsletter out, helping with the programming, and leading the support groups itself. So you're not hearing some of the stuff, but you're listening from people who have experienced it. And the dialogue that you can have with someone who is maybe 3 or 5 years out is so informative and very helpful. So if you can find, just to be brave a little bit more, I think if you can just get to the groups, we offer seminars too. We've got one upcoming at the end of August as well. So you can come check out that. It's a 4-hour Saturday seminar that will really give you a great start to understanding what you're feeling, some great helpful steps, and more of a task thing, like how to get through your days and how to set goals for yourself. And then being around people too will really uplift you. I really hope that I can answer any more questions. I know that's a lot to understand, but make sure that you are, the main point is please take care of yourself after this year. I think they rate the death of a spouse as, the first or second most devastating loss that you can encounter. So take some time. There are a lot of things that need to happen, a lot of moving parts that need to be addressed for your own protection, and just the fact that that's how it has to go. But at the same time, take your time, go through your days. There's certain ways to grieve respectfully, the right way, so you don't get triggered 5 years later and find yourself without hope. And I think that's what WPS does. It's the lifeline for a lot of people, and it really encourages you to look inside into yourself and find out that you're going to get through it, and there are other people doing it every single day, and that you're not alone. So I really encourage you to reach out to us in any way that you want to, whether it's just questions or coming to a group or catching someone at the next golf scramble. It's a good way to figure out, if that's going to be something that you like to be a part of. So yeah, and like Claire said, if there's questions, I'm sure we can get fed from our wonderful off-camera leaders over here. So thank you for sharing the stage with me, Claire. I think you do wonderful work here, and if people got to know Claire, she's just she leads from the heart, and I think that's where she serves her clients the best. And I'm just really happy to have met you professionally and personally.
Thank you so much.
No, it's really great. No, it's great. It's a wonderful thing. So I'm glad to have her on our side. And
I was so pleased to be associated with Widowed Person Service. I was so pleased to be associated with Widowed Person Service, and I encourage some of my friends to join the board. And if any of you out there are interested in being board members of Widowed Person Service in the future, they're always looking for good board members too. So, or people to work on their fundraisers.
yeah, we've got a great golf outing.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you mentioned this, Amanda, but all of the services at Widowed Person Service
they're free.
They're
free.
Free is good, right?
Every year we
Yeah.
try to grow our
Yeah.
budget, but
Right.
each year we do our individual fundraising. We don't receive grants or anything like that. So it is from the love and dedication and the commitment from people who have gone through the group and other community partners like Carrier Law that put back into making sure that no one feels alone. So it's a really special thing.
Right. And, just a note on when I was there about the programming, I know a lot of people think a support group is not for me. I'm not a support group person. I'm not going to go in to the meetings and bare my soul to a group of strangers. And I think Amanda will attest to the fact that that's not the way this is set up. So when you go to the support group meetings, there is a topic. How it's set up is 24 topics. They were developed by a clinical psychologist and a pastor at Calvin. So it's not religious based, but it does have elements of that, but there is no religious base to this. But they're going to be topics of interest to everyone. So for example, I think one of the topics was, how do I vacation by myself now that my spouse is gone? And it gives you tools to do things that you did as a couple that you're not going to be able to do as a couple anymore. So my point in that is that this isn't a clinical support group. That we aren't discovering whether people have clinical depression or not. What we're doing is we're giving them a topic of interest to anyone who has lost a spouse. And, you know, how do I celebrate Christmas now? Okay, how do I do holidays? My spouse did everything. Maybe I had a blended family. Maybe it was a second marriage. How do I incorporate those stepchildren? Those stepchildren are out of my life now. And we were all very close. So it gives you really practical, you talked about the practical aspects of grieving, not so much the clinical aspect. Widowed Person Services can certainly refer you to a clinical psychologist, but this is not a clinical setting. So they are social support groups, meaning that we're going to take a topic of interest to someone, anyone really who has experienced loss of a spouse, that anyone can relate to that topic. So I have never, and I'm sure Amanda is too, we have never had a person that said, I wish I'd never gone to the support group. Never. And we've never had a person who said that didn't apply to me. It's all going to fit in somewhere in a grief journey. I think the most difficult thing that Widowed Person Services answers is, what do I do with my free time? I've got way too much free time now. And it gives you a place, a safe place with people who are like you, to go have a good time. Like she said, lunch, dinner, you can go there, you can have a good time, you're not eating dinner. The worst thing I think for new widows is going to dinner at the old restaurant that you love, but now you're calling your friends to go to the restaurant and they're all married. And you feel like the third wheel. And so this gives you a group of people who are like-minded. And also, like Amanda said, I believe all of the counselors are widowed.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everybody's widowed. We don't have counselors that are not widows. They can't speak to grief. So our policy is to only have people who are widows and widowers. And some have been widows and widowers more than once. Right. So just know that you're going to meet people there that are exactly like you. It's not going to be a 20-year-old kid who's never been married who's going to facilitate a support group. That's not what we're talking about here. So anyway, if you have any questions, we'll take them. We'll take them now.
One of the questions, and if you can repeat after,
Mhm.
as a reminder, you mentioned about transferring the car. What do you do with RVs?
Okay. Okay. The question is, I mentioned about transferring the car at the Secretary of State to the surviving spouse. And if you have an RV or a boat, what do you do with those? Same thing. Okay. You're going to go over to the Secretary of State's office and you're going to get those registered in the surviving spouse's name. Good question.
An older sister passed away,
Mm-hmm.
had a common law partner, not married. Does that change who would file probate and put names on certain accounts?
The question is, a sister died and had a common law partner. Does that change anything? It depends on what sort of documents you have. The short answer to that question is, whoever died, you need to bring their paperwork into a lawyer's office and let them review the paperwork. I believe, and I'd have to check, that there is no common law marriage in Michigan. So it depends on where it where that is. But the short answer to that is that I can't answer it unless we see the paperwork. So, so anything they have documenting a will or a trust, just call our office, and we have lawyers here who'll be happy to go over that for free with you in a meeting and tell you where to go from there.
You mentioned changing the lineup on the powers of attorney application. How do you make those decisions?
Okay. The question is, how do you make the decision to change the lineups on a power of attorney? What you need to think about is who can make decisions for you, who you trust, and who you want to do your business, whether it's healthcare or financial power of attorney. So what we need to think about with the healthcare, if your spouse was up first and your spouse has passed away, who in my family maybe is a doctor or a nurse? Who's already going to a nursing home or doctor's appointments with me? Or who's that relative who always raises their hand and says, I'll take you to the chemo treatment? You need to go to that relative and say, hey, are you willing to be first up on my power of attorney? Now, the question with healthcare is, do they have to live in Michigan? No, they don't have to live in Michigan. You know, if you've got a child who lives in another state and they're an RN or they're a doctor, yes, you can put them first on the list, and they can do it on the phone. But that's less convenient, and we want to make sure people are willing to do that on the phone. But what we need to think about with healthcare power of attorney or financial power of attorney is who's good at writing checks, who's good at keeping records, and who, as a practical matter, is going to call my doctor 10 times and get my medication straight. And that's the person we're going to put first on the list. And maybe we have 2 people on the list just as a backup. There's no magic number. But if you had 2 or 3 people, that would be ideal. You know, but if you've got 1, you've got 1, you know. If a person who's already on your healthcare power of attorney is already sick, you know, we suggest taking them off, right? If they're going to chemo treatments, and you're not, they don't need to be doing your healthcare, right? They've got enough on their plate. So we just need to decide who's healthy, in good shape, and is a good decision maker for that. Thank you for that question. Any other questions?
Do you have to live in Grand Rapids or Kent County to be part of WPS?
Good question. The question is, do you need to be a resident of Kent County to be part of WPS? And no, there's really no membership per se. All of our activities and our social groups and our support groups are free of charge. You may see on the website some language, maybe just to register. Sometimes we do need to know as the group grows if the venue is large enough, or how to get a hold of you if we need to cancel, either for like weather permitting or whatever. So there's no requirement to be a resident. Like I said, we had many people even joining our Zoom support group on Tuesday nights from Minnesota, some from Detroit. So it really opened up who can get some of the resources. So there is no requirement. So.
Is everything in person now, or are there still?
So the question is, are we in person fully, and is there still a remote access? So a little bit of both. All 4 of our in-person support groups are now meeting together, and I think it's a wonderful thing. At the same time, we are still offering once a month our Zoom support group. It meets from 7 to about 8:30, and it's a great time too where people can just pop in if you can't get a sitter, or if you're running late from work and you can't get across town somewhere. So it bridges both. I encourage you to come in person if you can, but the remote version has worked well for a lot of people, and we're going to continue that as long as we see fit necessary and people are still attending. So great question.
I don't know if you can answer this clear because it's on social. What do you do? How does the wife's benefit change if the husband dies first?
The question is about how Social Security is handled. The short answer to that is usually, if you went through a funeral home, they're going to notify Social Security that the spouse has passed. In normal circumstances, the surviving spouse can assess, there'll be an assessment of whether the surviving spouse makes more money with their own Social Security, or if they can make more money with the deceased spousal benefit. That is really a question for the Social Security office. We don't do Social Security here, but I urge you to contact the Social Security office. There's one in Grand Rapids down by Celebration Cinema on Knapp. Make an appointment there and they can help you work through that. Any other questions?
You mentioned about looking at the documents. Is there a fee to do that? I mean, after someone passes and they have the estate plan?
Great question. There is a question about if we charge a fee to look over your documents, if you brought them in. There is no fee at Carrier Law for reviewing your estate plan, whether you purchased it here or at another attorney's office. There will only be a fee charged if we create a new estate plan for you. If you want something different, then we'll quote a fee based on whatever you want changed. So you may want something different after you look over yours. If you do, you'll come to that initial meeting that's free. We'll have a lawyer here look over all your documents, and then they'll suggest changes, and you'll decide at that time whether you want the change or not. And if you do, then they'll quote a fee based on what you want.
Are there other seminars like this coming up?
Yes, the question is, are there other seminars coming up? And we've got one, I believe I mentioned it at the beginning, August 31st. Jim Hinkey, who's an attorney in our office, it's a Tuesday. August 31st, Jim Hinkey is going to talk about powers of attorney. So he'll be going through the healthcare power of attorney and the financial power of attorney, and he'll be talking about how you choose people to help you with your healthcare and financial decisions. So that'll be a great seminar. If you don't have those in place, I think we've seen in COVID that people who didn't have a healthcare power of attorney had a really big mess trying to get into a hospital, especially if it wasn't a spouse. So those are more necessary than ever. We thought something like a pandemic could never happen. It's still going on over a year later. So everybody, I think, even, and I'm not talking old people, if you've got kids going off to college and they're not in downtown Grand Rapids, I encourage you to get at least a healthcare power of attorney from them, because once those kids turn 18 years old, you can't get one bit of information if they end up in a car wreck in a hospital. Just know that anybody over 18 years old after the pandemic needs at least a healthcare power of attorney, because we've all found out the hard way that you can't get any information, but they're happy to send you a bill from the hospital, right? So if you want to figure out the bill, right, we need a healthcare power of attorney to get that straightened out. So any other questions? Okay, we're going to be launching a poll in just a moment. Okay, so just to wrap up, wanted to let you know that our office does have a brochure that is called Losing a Loved One is Hard Enough, a guide to understanding the end-of-life legal process. If you'd like one of those, gives you a lot of good information in it, just call our office and we'll be happy to mail that. Also, if you call our office, we're happy to mail out anything about widowed person service too, or we can forward your name to Amanda and she'll get that out to you. And then right at the end of the seminar, you're going to see our contact information, both carrier law and widowed person service. So just get out a pen, and in a moment we'll have that information up and you can jot down how to contact us, either one of us, and get any information you need. I know widowed person service has a great new widowed package that goes out to all the new widows in Kent County. If you didn't get one of those, I encourage you to call Widowed Person Service and get that package. I know some people don't know what that is and they think it's junk mail and they throw it in the trash can. So if you got one, get it out of the trash can, because it's got a lot of good information in it. And if you aren't on that mailing list, I encourage you to look at Amanda's contact information and get that package sent to you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. And again, if you need any help at all with your estate, please give our office a call. Thank you.